Well, as we close out this final week for this edition, anyway, of stories from the Stiletto Gospel, I had at least one person ask me this morning what Broadway musical Jonathan was going to get asked to play. If you were here last week, he ended up playing from the musical Chicago, not typically a church hymn. I have no Broadway this morning. You're welcome, I'm sorry, whichever. But I do have this image in my head around this scripture that Albert read for us this morning from the 8th chapter of Proverbs. And I'm not going to ask you to raise your hands. I actually did that at 8:30. I'm not going to ask you to embarrass yourselves or take credit. But I'm wondering how many of you for whom this is a new story, for whom you've never maybe even cracked open the book of Proverbs. I'm sure the mixers class will get there eventually, won't they, Luann? You guys will get eventually to the book of Proverbs. I have this image in my head of this woman, a wild-haired woman. This woman with wild, crazy hair standing out on a street corner. Maybe this street corner right here at Cleaver in Maine on the 3rd week of December when all the crowds are trying to get to the plaza to see the lights and you can't find a parking spot, and there she stands. And not this street preacher in a black robe, but in something bright and colorful and mildly obnoxious. And she's shouting, "Hey, y'all listen up. All of y'all listen up. Because I'm talking to you. I am wisdom. And you should be listening because you need a little bit of me in your lives. You need a whole lot of me in your lives." And then I envision that she has this crazy house, this big 2-story house painted in a weird color. I don't know why I think she's so colorful, literally colorful. And she has this wild and crazy house, and wisdom lives with her neighbor, Sanity, up the street from knowledge and discretion in this wild neighborhood that they inhabit just off the intersection of Righteous Road and Justice Avenue. And I see this strong woman who has taken her message, God's message, to the streets, outside the walls of organized structures, out from behind conventional pulpits, out there. This is Lady Wisdom, this most ancient of biblical characters, one of the most ancient characters for whom many of you have never heard of. Yet our text tells us that she was at the side of God when all things were made, because she was birthed into being before everything else. Yes, birthed is the word. And I can't help but think to the 1st chapter of Genesis that we read 3 weeks ago, where the Creator is described as saying, "Let us make humankind in our image, according to our likeness." And so often people say, well, who is this us? Is this like the royal we? Who is this us? And here in this obscure chapter in an obscure book, it's after the book of Psalms, in case you're wondering, there almost might be an answer. Because in the very next verse, in the first chapter of Genesis, after it says, let us create humankind in our image, it says, male and female, they were created. And it's almost like there's this follow-up that we don't even know is there. And some of you are sitting there wondering why it says lady wisdom. Anybody speak or one time ever studied in school a language besides English? Right? And there are articles, right, in other languages that identify nouns in either a male or a female way, right? Some of you know this, right? For those of you who don't, there is. English is a very strange language. Well, she gets a female personification because grammatically she has a female article. If you read it in Greek and not in the Hebrew, because my Hebrew is not so good, if you take it and read it in the Greek, the word is one you might be familiar with. It's Sophia. Some of you named your children that. As she sits over there giggling, thinking about her child named Sophia. I didn't really see you over there until just now. And when you think about Sophia, that takes me, in my geeky mind, to the first chapter of John, where in the first chapter of John it is written, in the beginning was the Word, Logos. In the beginning was the Logos, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God, and Logos was in the beginning with God, and all things came into being. Wow, that sounds a lot like what we just read in the book of Proverbs, except that the writer of the Gospel, John, used a male word instead of a female one. Now, my geeky mind could do this all day, and that would be really fun for me, but I'm not going to subject you to that. And it really, to me, it doesn't seem to be the point. And we could get bogged down in the details and discuss or argue this for days about whether Sophia and Logos are the same, whether we should consider them to be the same. But I'm not sure that's very helpful, at least today. Another day, perhaps. Not today. Today, it seems most helpful to see actually the example that Lady Wisdom is giving to us and what she has to say to us. First, her example is out there. She is out in the world in the most public places. And this honestly is one of my favorite passages in probably the entire scriptures, certainly in the Hebrew scriptures. And one thing I had never noticed before is the line where it says, she raises her voice. And I thought, oh, that's just the way Eugene Peterson paraphrases it. So I, of course, go to more traditional versions. And the NRSV that we normally read also says, she raises her voice. Well, raising her voice, honestly, and I know this may actually come as a surprise to some of you, I actually try not to do that. I really try. When people start to raise their voice, that tends to be, preachers notwithstanding, that they're angry or they're scared. There's anxiousness of some kind. They're not in control of themselves. And so I try, generally, when people start to raise their voice, to try to bring the level of anxiety down. And I honestly try not to raise my voice at my children because I'm either angry or scared or not in control of myself. And it tends not to be very helpful because they just follow my example and raise their voice back. And she raises her voice. And that feels significant to me. She not only has something to say, she's going to say it loudly because you're not listening to her. Speakers are working today, John. She stands on her corner of First and Main, shouting at people. We tend to try to avoid those corners. And I'm not going to suggest this morning that we take up with a bully horn on the corner of Cleaver and Main and shout at people, but I am going to suggest that each of us might figure out what corner we are going to stand on and raise our voice. And what is it that Lady Wisdom is calling to you to raise your voice about? Now, some of you may already know because you are out there raising your voice on behalf of Lady Wisdom all the time. And you have been on some of those corners for a very long time. The corner of gun violence prevention, the corners of literacy and food insecurity. And Jonathan, I saw this week, is participating in the AIDS Walk KC, raising your voice about things that matter to you, specific things that matter to you. On Thursday night, I had the privilege to be downstairs in our fellowship hall, and it was packed with about 150, mostly women, meeting for the League of Women Voters, many of the leadership, female leadership in particular, of the NAACP in this town, and 2 different sororities, 4 organizations with a combined history of advocacy in this city of 400 years. Women who have been following in the footsteps of Lady Wisdom longer than I've been alive. Truly, one of these women had been a member of the League of Women Voters for more than 50 years. Standing on the corner of First and Main at the intersection of Righteous Road and Justice Avenue. And they have been serving lately to me as the voice of Lady Wisdom, helping me to find my little corner on which to stand. And Lord knows there are plenty of corners, and we can't stand on all of them. Some of us really try, but we can't stand on every corner, and we shouldn't try if we read Lady Wisdom carefully. She's in a specific spot, standing in a specific place for a specific reason. What corner is Lady Wisdom calling you to stand on and raise your voice? Now, I know Jeannie Martin is sitting right out there, and she's saying, well, if you want to find out more about corners on which you could stand, you can come to the Justice and Mercy meeting on Tuesday night. I know that's what she's sitting there thinking. She's in the red sweater if you don't know who she is and you want to talk to her later. She'll be glad to visit. We are going to talk about that on Tuesday night as our Justice and Mercy meeting. Shall we stand on the corner of literacy and education, or refugees and welcome? Shall we stand on the corner and raise our voice so that there is access to health care for everyone regardless of their income? Which corner shall we stand? Here at 46th and Main. Lady Wisdom is inviting us to join her out on Righteous Road at the intersection of Justice Avenue. She invites us from the uncomfortable chairs of our sanctuaries and the comfortable lazy boys of our living rooms out into life with her sister Sanity and their girlfriends Knowledge and Discretion, out into the world to raise our voices. And I know some of you are out there doing it. So this is your invitation and your permission to raise your voice a bit to the rest of us to help us get out there with you. And some of us, there are so many corners we don't even know which one to stand on. It is so overwhelming for some of us that we just stand still. We just stand still. And sometimes, for some of us, it is so noisy. The world is so noisy, we can't even hear Lady Wisdom calling to us to know which corner she's calling us to stand. You. I'm talking to you, she says. What corner are you going to stand on? Now, if you need a little help discerning her voice from all of the noise, well, maybe Lent will help. Lent will help. You know, I've been writing about how I love a map. I do love a map. And my children are sitting out there saying, they are mocking me in their heads because I love a paper map. And sometimes I just wish I had one from God that laid out for me Lady Wisdom's crazy neighborhood with all the streets, with my little X on it, to say, go stand there and go say this. Because there are so many corners on which to stand. And so maybe our little Lenten journey will be helpful. Lent is a time of self-discovery and preparation for new beginnings and new life. And I'm feeling like we have the opportunity to hear her a little more clearly in the coming weeks as we enter into the Lenten season. A Lenten devotional, a midweek jazz vespers, encouragement for quiet moments of listening in all kinds of ways. And friends, we have to be listening because she is calling us. And Lent is the perfect time to do it because we are working our way towards Easter, and Easter is indeed the beginning of new beginnings and new life. And if you listened carefully, when Albert got to the end, he said, Lady Wisdom will tell you that when you find her, you will find life. And that sounds like a pretty good Lent goal to me. Seeing Lent as a time of waiting through all the other noise to hear Lady Wisdom. But she's out there, standing on a street corner, waiting patiently, maybe, for us to find her. Standing out there on your corner, waiting for you, ready to stand with you, ready to raise her voice and help you raise yours. May we raise our voices this Lent. May it be so. May it be so for us. Amen.